Welcome to Flow Speak Studio, where English flows naturally. Let's start speaking with confidence.
Have you ever noticed that sometimes your English feels better, not when you're studying, not when you're forcing yourself to practice, but when you're just listening to music or walking in silence or hearing someone talk in the background? I remember one morning I was making coffee, half awake, music playing quietly, and suddenly I realized I was thinking in English, not trying, not translating, just thinking.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that it usually happens when we're not paying attention to it, when English is just there in the background of our life, not as a task, not as homework, but as sound, as atmosphere. And I think a lot of people don't realize how powerful that is.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Flow Speak Studio. I'm Emma, and as always, I'm here with Alex.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex. And today's episode is one of those topics that feels simple on the surface. But when you really think about it, it connects deeply with how we experience English in our daily lives.
Today, we're talking about music, podcasts, and silence, and how all three, not just one, shape the way we think in English. Because learning English isn't only about speaking or studying, it's also about what you let into your ears every day, and even what you don't.
Yeah, and this matters because so many learners feel pressure to always be doing something with English, listening to lessons, watching videos, repeating phrases. But very few people talk about how passive listening, emotional listening, or even silence can slowly change the way English lives in your mind.
Exactly. And maybe you felt this too. Maybe you've had moments where a song helped you remember a phrase, or a podcast made English feel more natural. Or maybe you noticed that when everything is quiet, your thoughts suddenly come in English without effort. Those moments are not accidents.
They're signals. They show us that language isn't only learned through force, it's absorbed through exposure, emotion, rhythm, and repetition over time.
And today, we want to slow down and talk about that, not in a technical way, not as a lesson, but as two people sharing real experiences, how music, podcasts, and even silence have helped us connect with English in a more human way.
So, if you're someone who feels tired of studying, if you feel like English only exists when you open a book, or if you've ever wondered why English feels easier when you're relaxed, this episode is for you. Take a breath, get comfortable, and let's talk about the sounds and the quiet moments that help English become part of your life.
When I think about how English really became part of my life, I realize it didn't start with grammar books or study schedules. It started with sound, with music playing in the background while I was doing something completely normal, cleaning, walking, cooking, even just lying on the bed doing nothing. I remember listening to songs in English without understanding everything, and instead of feeling frustrated, I felt curious. I didn't stop the song. I didn't translate every line. I just let the sound wash over me. And somehow, over time, phrases started to feel familiar, even emotional. It was like English stopped being a foreign language and started being a feeling.
Yeah, I relate to that so much. For me, podcasts played a similar role, but in a slightly different way. At first, I didn't understand everything. Honestly, sometimes I understood maybe 60%. And in the beginning, that bothered me. I kept thinking I should understand more. But then something shifted. I stopped listening to learn and started listening to accompany my day. I'd play a podcast while walking, while driving, while making coffee. And suddenly, English wasn't asking for my full attention. It was just there, like a companion. That's when it became natural.
And that's such an important distinction. When English asks for your full attention all the time, it becomes exhausting. But when it lives quietly in your environment, it becomes familiar. I've noticed that music especially does something emotional. A song can teach you rhythm, pronunciation, even attitude without you realizing it. You don't just learn words, you learn how English feels when it's sad, happy, relaxed, confident. Sometimes I remember phrases from songs faster than phrases I studied.
Same here. And there's also something interesting about repetition. When you listen to the same song or the same podcast regularly, your brain stops seeing it as new information. It starts recognizing patterns. I've had moments where I suddenly understood a sentence I'd heard dozens of times before, not because I studied it, but because my brain was finally ready. That kind of learning feels calm. It doesn't feel forced. And honestly, that's the kind of learning that stays.
Yes, and then there's silence, which people rarely talk about. Silence is uncomfortable for a lot of learners. When everything is quiet, your thoughts get louder. And sometimes those thoughts are in English, and that can feel strange at first. But silence is where something powerful happens. It's where your brain processes everything it has absorbed. Music gives you emotion. Podcasts give you structure. Silence gives you integration.
I've noticed that too. After listening to English for a while, if I sit in silence, maybe during a walk or before sleeping, my inner voice starts using English naturally. Not perfectly, not fully, but enough to notice the shift. And that's when you realize English isn't something you're turning on and off anymore. It's slowly becoming part of how you think.
And I think that's what many learners are missing. They think progress only happens when they're actively studying, but a lot of progress happens when English becomes part of your atmosphere. The sounds you choose, the moments of quiet you allow, the way English exists around you, not just in front of you. That's not lazy learning, that's human learning.
But even with music, podcasts, and silence, there's still that voice. You know the voice that says, "This isn't enough. Other people are studying harder. You should be doing more." Sometimes I'm listening to something in English and instead of enjoying it, I start judging myself. Why didn't I understand that sentence? Why am I still missing words after all this time? And suddenly, something that felt calm turns into pressure.
Yes, that inner dialogue is very real, and it's one of the biggest hidden obstacles. A lot of learners don't struggle with English itself, they struggle with the expectation of how learning should look. They compare their quiet progress to someone else's loud progress. Sometimes they forget that understanding grows in layers, not in straight lines.
Exactly. And there's also guilt. Guilt for not pausing the song to check the lyrics. Guilt for letting a podcast play in the background without catching every detail. Guilt for choosing comfort over intensity. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, if I'm not exhausted, I'm not improving, which, when you say it out loud, sounds a bit crazy. But that thought is deeply ingrained.
It is. Many of us were taught that learning must be uncomfortable to be effective, that struggle equals progress. But language doesn't work like that, not in real life. In real life, language grows through exposure, emotion, repetition, and safety. And safety is important. If your brain feels judged, even by yourself, it closes, it stops absorbing naturally. That's not a failure, that's biology.
I've noticed that when I feel relaxed, I understand more. But when I feel tense, even simple sentences feel heavy. And then there's the fear of forgetting. I'll think, if I don't write this down, I'll lose it. So instead of listening, I start grabbing for control. And I miss the moment.
Yes, and forgetting is part of the process. We forget, we rehear, we recognize, we reconnect. You don't need to catch everything the first time, or the second, or even the 10th. Your brain is not a recorder, it's a filter. It keeps what it needs when it's ready.
Hearing that actually takes some weight off because a lot of learners carry this silent pressure to be perfect listeners, perfect learners. But maybe the goal isn't perfection. Maybe it's presence, being present with the sound, with the moment, without constantly evaluating yourself. That feels lighter.
It is lighter, and it's also more sustainable. When English stops being a test and starts being a companion, your inner dialogue changes. Instead of, am I good enough? It becomes, I'm getting used to this. And that shift, emotionally and mentally, is where real progress begins. So let's bring this into real life. Not theory, not rules, just things you can actually do without changing your whole routine. One simple shift is this: stop treating English input as a task and start treating it as atmosphere. Music while you cook, a podcast while you clean, silence when your brain is tired. None of that needs to be optimized.
Yes. For example, in the morning, I don't study English. I just let something play quietly. Maybe a familiar voice, maybe music with English lyrics. I'm not forcing understanding. I'm letting the sounds sit there, like background light. And some days I notice things. Some days I don't. And both days count.
Exactly. Another practical idea: choose familiarity over difficulty. Re-listen to the same podcast episode. Replay the same songs. Watch clips you've already seen. Repetition without pressure creates recognition. Recognition creates confidence. You don't need new content every day to improve.
That was hard for me to accept. I thought if I already listened to this, it doesn't count. But actually, the second or third time is when things click. That's when phrases feel familiar instead of foreign. And I didn't have to work harder, I just stayed longer.
Yes, and here's another life-friendly habit. Use silence on purpose. Silence helps your brain organize what it has absorbed. It's not empty time, it's integration time. If you're always filling every moment with English, your brain doesn't breathe. Learning needs space.
I also started doing this tiny thing. If I catch a phrase I like, I don't write it down immediately. I just repeat it once in my head. Maybe later, maybe not. That way, English stays connected to feeling, not to obligation.
That's a beautiful example, because language sticks better when it's connected to emotion, rhythm, and comfort. So the practical takeaway is simple. Let English exist around you. Reuse content without guilt. Accept silence as part of learning. Trust that exposure accumulates. No schedules, no punishment, no intensity contests.
And maybe the most important part, if a habit feels heavy, it's probably not helping. English should feel like it's slowly moving closer to you, not chasing you.
Before we get into the phrases, I want to slow this moment down a little, because these phrases aren't about sounding impressive. They're about sounding comfortable. Let's start with, let something play in the background. Let's start with, let something play in the background. The meaning of this phrase is have audio on while you're doing something else without focusing on it. You're cooking, cleaning, driving, or relaxing. English is there, but it's not demanding attention. For example, I let an English podcast play in the background while I make coffee. This one helps your brain absorb rhythm, pronunciation, and familiar sounds naturally. No pressure.
Both days count. Both days count. It means progress happens even on days when you don't feel improvement. Some days you understand a lot. Other days you feel lost. Both are part of learning. For example, some days I understand everything, some days nothing, but both days count. This phrase reduces guilt and perfectionism.
Choose familiarity over difficulty. Choose familiarity over difficulty. The meaning of this is select content you already know instead of always choosing harder material. Rewatching, re-listening, repeating instead of always searching for advanced content. For example, I choose familiarity over difficulty when I feel tired. Familiar input builds confidence and automatic understanding.
Things click. Things click. It's used when understanding suddenly feels easy or natural. After hearing the same phrase many times, one day it just makes sense. For example, after listening again, things finally clicked.
Integration time. Integration time. The meaning is time when your brain organizes what it has learned, often during silence or rest. Moments without input, walking, resting, or being quiet. For example, silence helps my brain. It's integration time. Silence is part of learning, not a break from it.
Connected to obligation versus connected to feeling means learning sticks better when it feels natural, not forced. Repeating a phrase because you like how it sounds, not because you should. For example, I want English to feel connected to feeling, not obligation.
Exposure accumulates. Exposure accumulates. The meaning is small amounts of contact add up over time. Listening a little every day without measuring progress. For example, even if it feels small, exposure accumulates.
If it feels heavy, it's probably not helping. If it feels heavy, it's probably not helping. Can be used when learning feels stressful, it may be blocking progress. Forcing yourself when tired or overwhelmed. For example, if studying feels heavy today, I'll rest. That helps too.
English should move closer to you. English should move closer to you. Learning should feel supportive, not chasing or pressuring you. A calm, sustainable relationship with English. For example, I want English to move closer to me, not chase me. These phrases aren't just vocabulary. They're permission to learn gently. Before we finish today, I just want to sit with everything we talked about for a moment. This episode wasn't about learning faster or doing more. It was really about understanding that English can live quietly in your life, the same way music, comfort, or silence does. And that idea alone can change how heavy learning feels. When English stops feeling like a task and starts feeling like a presence, something soft happens inside you.
Yeah, and I think that's the part people don't hear enough. We're so used to measuring progress, counting hours, checking levels, that we forget how humans actually learn. Real progress often happens when you're not paying attention to it. It happens while you're drinking coffee, while you're tired, while you're letting something play in the background. And those moments matter more than we think.
If you're listening to this and thinking, I'm not doing enough, I want you to know that feeling is very common and very misleading. You don't need perfect routines, intense focus, or constant motivation. You need consistency that feels kind, not punishing. English doesn't grow through pressure, it grows through exposure, repetition, and emotional safety.
And it's okay if today you didn't feel sharp. It's okay if you didn't understand everything. It's okay if English felt distant. That doesn't erase anything you've built. Your brain is still working. Integration is still happening. Sometimes silence, rest, or comfort are exactly what helps things click later.
So maybe tonight, instead of asking yourself, did I study enough? You ask something different. You ask, did English feel close to me today? Because when English feels close, familiar, safe, present, progress follows naturally.
You don't need to chase English. Let it walk with you. Let it sit with you. Let it exist in your daily comforts. That's how it becomes real. That's how it becomes yours.
Thank you for spending this time with us. Wherever you are, whatever your day looked like, you're doing better than you think. Keep going gently, keep listening, and we'll be right here with you in the next episode.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment down below.